but we'll help Ryan and Sparky get in the ring together. Because Ryan says, I think the top teams are just tired. All three have gone deep in competitive competitions. It happens. It's tough, dude. And Sparky says, I don't buy this player shit.
I like the voices you gave each person.
I know, yeah, it's like making it a bit more cartoonish than it has to be. But top teams have always played a lot of games with smaller squads and only one sub in the past. I kind of have my answer to this, but what do you say to that?
I have to know. You start.
uh,
I always have to start.
I say it's because you're comparing. Sparky is, old school, and I think when you compare old school, the teams on top and the other teams have a much bigger gap than there is now. You didn't have the little guys full of international players and top players and stuff like that in the past. Everybody had, because obviously there wasn't as much money floating around with broadcasts and all that kind of stuff. So I think, especially domestically, like domestic league wise, I thought the English teams had a much easier time, which is why they were not at times as successful when they went. And this is when like the Italian teams and stuff like that were doing better because they had a much tougher league. I think now you see, obviously this year's the exception, but English teams doing a lot better because they face better opposition domestically than they used to. I'm not saying the teams were shit, but the gap was a lot bigger, relatively, compared to like what a smaller team can build in terms of a squad. You're still talking a lot of money being spent by the smaller clubs. I think that's like the biggest reason. Now that's why you need a deeper team. So because you got to be able to, that's the difference now, is you can afford to have a deeper team as the big boys and maybe have some guys, your bench is international players now, right? Whereas maybe the smaller teams do not have, once they throw out their 11 and maybe one more guy, they're like, these are all the chips we had. And then, we can just put fresh legs, but not the same quality. Whereas the big boy can still be like, oh yeah, here comes Nunez off the bench. He's going to create chaos. And then you just like throw him out there. So I think that's why is the biggest difference. So I do buy compared to past, I understand the tired thing, because when the levels are close and you're tired, the levels become even. When you're up here, even if you're tired, you're still so much better than the other guy. It doesn't matter.
It's amazing. That's exactly what I was going to say. Word for word.
Jackass.
And I mean, that when you were talking about that, it kind of, it's funny. I think the recency bias is such a big thing too, because I saw so much discourse on the internet about, how great people were mocking the Premier League for being this great league of English clubs, and they can't even make it past these competitions in Europe. When you think back to City won the Champions League last year, there was an all-English final 3 years ago between Chelsea and City. Liverpool's made 3 finals in the last 7 years. Like, English clubs have been at the end of these competitions year in and year out. And just because this year, many of them got knocked out in the quarterfinals or what have you, all of a sudden it's like, the English league isn't good enough because look at these teams. They can't even compete with teams across Europe. But when you think about it, it's because they're beating each other up in the Premier League, honestly. Yes. Like there's so much there that, if you then go away and play against a Bayern who has to only play 2 other teams in their league every other year, or you play against Real Madrid who has to worry about Barcelona or Atletico. I'm not even going to put Girona in there because that's a one-off that probably won't happen again. And, you stack it up against PSG, who never have to play against anyone else. Yeah, these clubs are going to come out a bit on top because they don't have to play such a grueling season.
Yeah. And I think that's like the biggest thing. By the way, Sparky says only 1 sub in the past. So I think Sparky must be really old school.
Because I do not remember the 70s, 80s, right?
Yeah, I do not remember 1 sub. I mean, I'm like 2 sub old school rules. So I don't know when it was 1. But I think the number of subs back then doesn't matter because it's not the depth of the team that's gaining the advantage. Your overall quality is so much better. Now it's the depth that matters. So that's why the big boys have pushed the leagues to be allow like 3, then 5 and stuff like that, because it does. And that's why, Sean Douche and stuff was fighting really big against it when he was, I think, at Burnley at the time, because they know that gives an advantage to the team that can bring another Brazilian star off the bench, another star from Uruguay on the bench, and then you have, you know, like Joe from around the corner.
Joe from Tesco.
To clear the ball and defense is all you can put in. I think that makes like a big difference. Only Spanish clubs have more European success over English. And I think that's partially because in their case, they've been able to cruise. I mean, look at Real now. They beat Barcelona yesterday as well. So now they're kind of set. So you can rotate and be comfortable in the Champions League. I know this hasn't happened. Barcelona is on the decline. They used to go toe-to-toe till the last week, but I think they were able to kind of like manage. And here's another thing. Nobody else has 2 domestic cups. There was a lot of like outrage over the FA Cup replay that we never got around to. There's so many topics to talk about. But nobody else has 2 domestic cups. So something has to give, especially as they add more Champions League games and they're kind of building their own Super League over there.